I want to take the position that fate is actually a good thing. And I'm actually very pro fate because I think we need to take into account not just the challenging things that come with certain things being predetermined or fated in terms of hardships that we experience in our lives, but also some of the positive things as well. And that there's this beautiful sort of interweaving of the positive and negative events in our life, of like the negative hardships that we had to experience in order to have this positive thing later on, or this positive thing that occurred that eventually had some negative outcome, but it eventually became tied in with our overall life story. And sometimes when people look back and think of some of those things, they realize once they get to a certain point in their life when things have evened out a little bit, that they wouldn't go back and change it necessarily, or they wouldn't trade it, because if they got rid of some of the hard things, then some of the positive things that they were able to achieve later wouldn't have happened. And so it's part of this entire calculus that you have to add up of all of the totality of events in your life that created your life story and who you are and what you've accomplished and how far you've come. And all of that is tied in with this notion of fate as being the sequence of events according to some meaningful or purposeful sequence, essentially. Because the opposite of that we have to contrast is the modern materialistic sort of skeptical notion of everything just being chaos, and that we're in a meaningless and purposeless universe where the earth is just like this rock that's floating around in space with like a speck of like mold on it of life that just sprouted out of nowhere, but otherwise there's no purpose for any of our lives, and we just have to like make the best out of it, out of whatever time we have floating around on this rock aimlessly in space. I think that astrology and its connection with the concept of fate and its ability to access this realm of existence of fate, where it can demonstrate that fate exists. One of the most important religious or spiritual or philosophical things about that implications is that it implies that our lives are not random or meaningless, but that each of us has some sort of life story or narrative that runs throughout our lives and all of the events within it, and that it also interconnects us with the lives of many other people around us in our family unit, in our city unit, in our generational unit, and even down through human history, through the past and all the way through the future. And to me, there's something that's incredibly beautiful about that, where I see that as a positive thing, a net positive thing, even if it has some negative things implicit, but ultimately that it's something beautiful and interesting and inspiring rather than something that's like negative or oppressive.
One thing that I'll add as a kind of funny little anecdote is that, of all of the clients that I work with, the people that I find have that want the most concrete, specific information are often the students of astrology. Because I think that as students of astrology, people are working with those archetypal possibilities and they can flip the jewel so many times. And they're like, oh, could you just help me make sense of like this Venus-Saturn transit? Like, well, what the heck of all the possibilities? Like, well, which one should I be really looking for here? Whereas I find that, people who come in who don't know astrology, who aren't into it at all, they're so much more satisfied, I've found in general, with like archetypal specificity. So that's just a funny irony.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all astrologers. We want to see how far we can take it. Almost like astrology is like this car, and you want to see, just like you want to get in, you want to see how fast you can drive it. You want to see how specific can you get with making predictions about future events that turn out to be true. And I think that's a natural tendency for all astrologers once they learn the potential of astrology. And that's okay, because all of us are constantly exploring and trying to figure that out. And I think, as astrology continues to progress, we'll continue to find both different areas where astrology can do things that are surprising. And that's been one of the great things about the revival of ancient astrology, is finding some of the Time Lord systems and finding different techniques in astrology that can do things that we didn't think were possible in 20th century astrology, that was less predictive in its orientation, but then also at the same time acknowledging and recognizing some of its limits is very important as part of that conversation as well. And I hope that we can find a right balance between those two things and making room for those two things without, going too far in one direction or another.